Hello? All right. I felt a bit loud. How is this? Is this a good distance here? Yes, I think it is.
Hello? Can you hear me? Can you guys hear me? Yeah. You just don't care already. Penn speaks and they're like,
Can I suggest that in the first, handful of moments or minutes, you're of course welcome to take pictures, but what we're going to try to do is have something of a real dialogue, of a real conversation. Now, admittedly, that's hard to do when you have two people on a stage with microphones and no one else with microphones. But we do have some mics that are going to be circulated once we're basically just going to present our premise, which a little bit you saw there. I'm not sure that that's not entirely nonsense at this point, that little video that you saw, but it at least, sets the stage. So yeah, take your pictures and that kind of stuff. But as we go on, it'll be really nice to not have that interface. Of course, take what I say with a grain of salt. I mean, it's the age of. I mean, what would I have with that? What kind of career would I have without iPhones?
You would have nothing. You would have nothing.
So this is no shade for to the phone, to the screen. Hi, how are you? Good. All right. How's Chicago? I've only been here for barely 12 hours, so I can't really say that much. And Nira, not much longer for you.
Yeah,
right?
I've been here like 14 hours. I used to live here though, so woo!
Actually, I recorded a record here, like back in 2014.
Woo!
Yeah, I have a band that probably only a few of you know about. Let's not talk about that now.
Okay.
So it's interesting because, like, we're never sure how many people are showing up for this based on, like, I don't know, just my presence or what sense you have of what you're here for. We're really curious about that, and we're gonna respond to that and hopefully influence it. Nura and I met. Was it just before the pandemic?
Yeah.
It was, because then we got this thing going, and then the pandemic sort of interrupted it, and we had to distill it a bit. But Dr. Nura she's a professor at ASU, and why don't you tell them a little bit about what you specialize in and how that brought us to realize that we have something of a Venn diagram. In between her sphere of experience and expertise and my sphere of experience and non-expertise, there is something interesting, which is what we're doing here. So why don't you just maybe kind of introduce us all to how you reached out to me in the beginning?
Sure. And you can hear me okay, right? It doesn't. Okay. Hi everybody. So good to see everyone here. So I teach at Arizona State. And I also have a private practice where I'm a couples relationship therapist. So my focus is on like all things love and dating and all that, like all that stuff. And so I had noticed in my classes that a lot of my students were really basing their hopes for relationships and their expectations of relationships based on what media had been teaching all of us was what we should be looking for. And so people had like very specific views on like love and passion and commitment and difficulty and triumph and all of that. And it just got me thinking a lot about what we're taught versus what we need. And what's truth. And so Penn's business partner is one of my closest friends, Nava, also his podcast co-host. And so I reached out to her and I was like, okay, you know Penn, he works in the belly of the beast. He's an actor on like a somewhat known show. You guys have probably never heard of it. And
Talking about the Bedford Diaries, right?
Right. How I was really wanting to have somebody who was working closely in the media industry to come and talk about how the industry gets us thinking the way that we do. So I asked Nava if she would be willing to put me in touch with Penn to see if he would come to ASU to give a talk. And she did, and he was. And he was like immediately down. And so in our first conversation about it, he was saying, rather than, so we didn't know each other at all. And he was like, rather than me just standing up and giving a speech, how about we have a conversation? How about I have a conversation with someone who knows something about relationships? Because at this point, in his mind, I'm just a teacher at ASU. And he's like, how about I have a conversation with somebody who actually knows about love and relationships? And I was like, it me. And so then we started talking about what it would be like to just have a conversation together on stage. And that was the beginning of our team, or whatever we want to call it. And then we realized that we each brought something pretty special to the space. I brought human psychology, the science element of human dynamics, and
I brought. It's still unclear. It's still unclear. What I seem to bring.
Well, I was going to answer that.
Oh, please go then. Please, yes.
No. So I brought the sciencey piece of it, and he brought the experience-y piece of it. And, now you can talk more.
Sure. And we're going to get to, once we've somewhat successfully introduced this concept, this premise, our conviction, our thesis, spiraling around that drain. Once we get there, then actually we have just a series of questions that give this thing a whole arc. So, and we're I want to be transparent about how we're learning about this too. If anybody had the clear answers to the questions we're asking, we wouldn't need to ask them, and there would be no strife in the world. So it's this is a format. You've all come here kind of willing and open-minded. We hope. And so have we. So it's this basic premise, what I became really interested in is this idea that personal transformation is intimately linked with social transformation. And that we currently have this idea, understandably, but that we complicate and politicize matters that sometimes are simple. This is not to say that they're easy at all. Not even close to easy. They're quite difficult and huge, but that they remain, that the problems of great social challenges, which are ultimately relationships between entities, between organizations, between nations, between factions, these are there's the exact same dynamic present in interpersonal relationships of the smallest kind, which is to say your friend, your family member, your significant other. Really, and we really believe that to such a high degree that we're doing this, I guess. So the idea is, and sometimes this is looked a bit like we can talk about kind of like relationship advice. The lovely thing about having a social scientist present is that you start to realize these ideas you have about love relationships, for instance. Like primary attachment relationships, what actually sustains a relationship between two people. They're not secret, mystical, unknown things. The sciences have discovered actually, and are studying and documenting, turning into statistics what keeps relationships going. It's not a friggin' magic trick here, but the way that it's represented in media is as though it's this angel of passion has to descend upon two people for some arbitrary reason and visits them passionately for a while, and then it sort of falls apart, and then you don't know what to do, and you can't talk, and you're trying to change, and then it's just it all falls apart. And it makes for a good story, but it makes a person miserable, in real life. It doesn't sustain a relationship past ever the 2-year mark. I've spent my life portraying relationships. You see a fiery beginning and a fiery end, and the middle is just sort of a montage. It's sort of skipped over. But the middle is what we're all trying to live for. The middle is what we're all trying to achieve. It's actually a state of grace, and it's really exciting and lovely. But it's not what we're shown. And then go figure. the state of affairs between larger bodies politic or whatever you want to call it, like the state of affairs between any larger corporate entities is also a mess, and we're suggesting that it might not just be correlated, it might also be causal,
So here we are.
So do we jump to the slides already, or?
We can, yeah. So we're here to have a conversation with you guys about these elements that it takes to make relationships work on a small level and on a large level. And at the core of it really is learning how to have meaningful, sometimes difficult conversations with people that we don't necessarily agree with. Like, would you guys agree that these days it's kind of, everyone's looking for a fight. Everyone's looking to be offended. Everyone's looking for a fight. And we've kind of lost touch with how to hold space for opinions we don't believe in, but also maintain respect for the person that we're talking to. And so that's really what we're trying to unpack together today, is how to find a space of unity with one another, even if we don't necessarily see things in the same way. And what does it take to create that?
And I think where the sort of love and relationships piece really intersects nicely with this is like, I personally have been portraying like love relationships in television so long, like I'm not even close to interested in like relationship advice or like love stories. At this point I'm like, ugh. However,
I am.
However, I'm married, and I have kids, and what I've been learning for the last, everybody's like, oh shit.
They all leave.
Thanks for coming. No. Okay. Lost.
They want their money back.
Yeah. Right. Did they pay for this?
Yeah.
But seriously, like I've had this interesting, surreal experience of understanding what it, like depicting a kind of love for my work, and then realizing like, wow, this does not track in real life, like at all, not at all.
Yeah.
The humility that it eventually takes one, and you don't encounter it until you're at a certain point in a relationship. So like, some of you may not have experienced it. Maybe many of you have. Maybe very few of you have. I don't know. I mean, you're all college students, and I don't know what I'd experienced of this when I was in college. I think maybe at that point my relationships were fraught because I hadn't yet understood really like what the stuff of a meaningful relationship actually is. It's not what I'd seen. Certainly not what was modeled by any of the adults I grew up around either, by the way. So it's not only do we not see it modeled for us in media, we don't see it modeled for us really by a lot of our families, and those of us who do, hey, listen, you've got to stand strong for the rest of us and share what you've learned. Before we all got sidetracked by the fact that I'm married, what I was trying to say was that, what we're going to be talking about today is largely social, and we want big social questions. Like, actually, the last time we did this, we had someone from Russia speaking about like how, we kind of started with like one of the hardest questions there is, which is like,
Don't give them ideas. You're going to give them ideas for hard questions.
Okay. But you can imagine. We talk about refugees and all this kind of stuff. It's like, well, all right, great. This is great. It applies at all levels. But basically, what you learn, like when you're okay, say marriage is a ground where this can be tested. When you get far enough along a line, you realize truth can be so subjective that it doesn't matter for at least a period what the truth is. You both need to be in a humble and soft and open enough state to really listen. Now, it is remarkable. It is remarkable when you're in that place, you're like, wow, not only have I not done this a lot in my life, who in the hell was going to tell me about this? Why didn't anybody tell me about this? You know, again, those of you who have like healthy families, share. Share the fruit of your knowledge with the rest of us. But those of us who, you know, don't come from that, which is, I think, a growing majority of us. Again, otherwise this would be irrelevant. We could just talk about season 5. I gotta make a few jokes. Yeah. Anyway, so hopefully something of our point is being made here. You know, hopefully we're gonna jump all around, and you guys are also gonna drive it as much as we are gonna shape it, and we'll leave here with answers to all of the world's problems.
Are you guys ready?
Yeah.
Should we start?
That's enough. Dr. Nura has the remote.
I do. The remote of truth. Okay. Where do I aim at?
Oh, and maybe the last thing I can say to frame the first question that's going to come up is this idea that, like, increasingly it's hard to know where to turn for truth. I think we know, like, that's clear with. Okay, so whatever. We'll just say We'll just say this. Do you want to read this?
Our belief is that social change happens when we learn how to have meaningful conversations with the other. We've already kind of, I think, set the stage for that.
And maybe to clarify, like, this is not all that's needed for meaningful social change, but this is one significant, like, spearhead into the matter, I think, right?
We're definitely not trying to say that this is all the things that are needed to heal the world. It's just one of the big things. I know.
Maybe we're gonna need this gentleman's help the entire time. Thank you, sir.
Is there a trick to this, or is it just not? No, you're good.
No, it's not. The on button is the answer. We forgot to turn it on.
Right. Do you want to read this?
Sure, yeah. So a significant premise or principle here, which I will be interested to hear what you guys think, is actually that people are good, that people can be good, that altruism actually is like our natural state, but that it has to be cultivated. And the way that it's cultivated is through collaboration. And so, you know, again, the more we dig into this, the more it can actually kind of be agitating and like kind of conjure up a lot of intense feelings, because this isn't about simply being agreeable and making friends arbitrarily with people who are willfully hateful and ignorant. But it is about understanding where ignorance and hatred come from, what cultivates ignorance and hatred. We do need to understand that. And in order to understand that, we need to be able to regard people we see as ignorant and hateful as at least human and with the capacity for good. Increasingly, you know, like we're in a writer's room, we sort of paint people in broad strokes and say they all the time. Like they this, they that, you know. And I think it's not helpful, you know. I mean, I think we should think in our lives of groups of people we just sort of castigate and categorize as they, you know, and constantly talk about them as though we know them, which is, you know, it's significant. Like, often it's not the case. Huh?
I wanted to say, like, this first point might seem kind of like simple or not necessary to point out, but I think it's actually really important to think about it this way, because so often when we engage in these conversations with people that we don't agree with, we don't, how do I say this? We tend to assume the worst in people anytime they do something that upsets us. Like, anytime something rubs us the wrong way, we default to they meant to hurt me, they don't care about me, they're being selfish, they're ignorant, they're racist, whatever it is. Like, we default to like the worst possible explanation of it. Even in our most basic day-to-day things, like if you're driving down the street and somebody cuts you off, how often are we like, what a jerk? When really, how often could we really think, maybe they have to get to the hospital? Maybe there's an emergency. Maybe something's wrong. We default to the worst possible identity for the other person.
And personalize it as well. I mean, because I was
100%.
thinking, like, in most cases, they're probably not headed to the hospital, let's be real. But, but it also has nothing to do with us.
Right, it's
It is
not
not,
personal.
it is not a single thing
it's
to
not
do with
personal.
us.
Yeah.
And then at the very most, they could be saving a life. You're right. They could absolutely be on the way to saving a life and delivering a child at the same time. So you never know.
It's really fun working with him. Okay, so I wanted to point that out just so we can kind of start thinking about how we tend to, what our default way of thinking is, so that we realize that this first point is actually a really important one to think about, that it's not personal, and that people, more often than not, are actually coming from an understandable place.
Yeah, which is not to say a good place, but it is to say that once we understand, maybe we can understand what good there is. And you know, this question will maybe come up repeatedly tonight. Like, I am curious to hear, like, do you think people are good? You know, is that your viewpoint? Is that your perspective? Like, what capacity for good do you, each one of you individually, believe people have? Because that informs the way we behave. You know, it does inform the way we behave and what we think is possible, and whether or not we choose, you know, to do, quote unquote, something.
We want to hear it, but not now. Okay, next. Did we do the second?
Huh?
Did we do the second one? No.
I don't know.
Oh, we did, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, skip.
No, I don't know. I mean, so this is, I think, her part very much. So why don't you just kind
Yeah,
of
we
go
threw
over
this slide
stuff.
in just to talk very briefly about the psychology of division. This is something I hear about a lot in my classes, is that it's human nature to divide. It's human nature to be separate. And that's not actually what the data suggests at all. And in fact, one of the points that has been made by some of the scholars in this field is that actually we, as a global community, wouldn't be here today if we were naturally divisive. We've only made it this far because we're naturally collaborative and we're naturally designed for interpersonal connection. So I do want to kind of address that in the beginning, is that part of our premise is to be clear that human beings are designed for collaboration and not contention.
And that this is what unlocks that potential for being truly good in a way that it removes this ceiling of what we believe is possible. Which I think these days the bar is pretty low. A lot of us. I know social media is a toxic misrepresentation of real life in a lot of ways, but it does show us something, and it does. If what people say on social media is any kind of bar, the bar is low for what we think humans are capable of. I think. I think. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah. So we would say that rather than it being human nature for us to divide, it's more human culture that causes division. And so this slide is to also just point out kind of the psychology of why we divide.
Capitalism.
Okay, yeah, that too.
Come on, it's college. Yeah.
That's the whole talk. That's the whole talk. Okay. First thing is that a lot of times when we default to a sense of like us and them, we and they, it creates a sense of community for the people that you consider we, but it also creates a sense of division, obviously. But that sense of community, that sense of belonging is what so many of us crave. And I would say it's actually like the most fundamental human need is connection. And so by identifying an us versus those guys, that us defaults to a sense of connectivity and community for a lot of people. The other piece of it, you know, I think a lot of times, I think about all the comments that I see on social media about people who kind of take it upon themselves to be like the social justice warrior who's going to put you in your place and show you all the ways in which you're ignorant and stupid and didn't come from a good place. And I think what happens a lot of times with that is that in the process of kind of putting somebody in their place, we simultaneously start to feel like the hero. And that leads to the last point, which studies have actually found. There was a study done out of Harvard that found that when people engage in some kind of like social justice like aggression, the reward centers of their brain is firing. So you're actually getting a chemical hit every time you think you're putting somebody in their place. Every time you think you're telling them off, your brain is like, yes, more, more, more. And it can actually become chemically addictive. And I think that's one of the reasons why we engage in it so much, is because our body is actually like thriving off of it. Our brains are just like eating it up.
You know, and I want to point out another thing, like just the levels of violence that we're so accustomed to accepting are, it's really multifaceted and deep, you know, not just physical violence, but layers and layers and levels of emotional violence, intellectual violence, you know. So as we talk about this, as we consider it together, you know, I want to appreciate that it's a very fine and challenging line to walk here, because, you know, what surely is true is as chemically addictive as maybe a certain approach to in this case we're saying like justice could be. I mean, you know, we also, the soul desires justice. Like, you know, the mind is trying to figure justice. The heart yearns for justice. Humans collectively are motivated by a sense of justice. So, you know, we'll be thinking about what that even means in a way. Like it can get, like, we'll try to avoid getting too heady and abstract, but I think we're always going to want to sort of like seesaw with this a bit, because, you know, believing that the pursuit of justice is a spiritual impulse, is a good and incredible impulse. It's the impulse that we need to cultivate actually in ourselves and in everyone we come into contact with. But then understanding where the levels of violence that we've come to accept as just normal and unavoidable might be perpetuating cycles of violence and hatred that literally prohibit the sort of justice we're pursuing. So we're acting in a way that we don't realize is so counterproductive to what our heart is yearning for, you know. Let's go to the next slide.
Yep. Okay.
So we're at the questions now.
Yeah. Question time. So first question.
Who is that? I'm kidding. It's all good. It's all good. If you weren't already standing, I would say, stand up, sir. Yeah. So what we really want everybody, in the context that we've provided, hopefully it's intelligible. Hopefully you get where we're coming from. If we've jumbled it up, hopefully you can. Okay. See you. Yeah. I'll see you next time.
This was bothering me.
What is the mouse?
Sorry. You guys got to see my OCD in action, so.
Yeah, so just think for a moment, you know, and then anybody who feels like they want to offer in front of 1,000 people. No, I think there's about 600, something like that.
Yeah.
If you would like to offer your thoughts, what do you think? Why is this funny? She's not accustomed to stages like I am. What do you think gets in the way of having these meaningful conversations? Well, we got one. We have a few. I'm going to go ahead and can I call on you?
Wait. Do we have people with microphones?
Yes, we do. But I'm pointing at you behind.
Okay.
Yes, you're the one who just pointed at your head. Yes.
What I think gets in the way of having certain meaningful conversations is that and I'm really nervous, so.
That's all good.
I feel like certain people are a bit more obsessed with being visible and being right, or what they decide to be right, than they are with actually connecting with people and understanding people. So they are, at least for the internet, and I've just witnessed that, I've experienced that firsthand, where people are more invested in being popular and being portrayed as saviors and being portrayed as the morally right person, instead of actually understanding the opposite side and understanding why the opposite side thinks that way. Because discourse breeds attention, and attention can be manipulated to your advantage, which for some people is more beneficial than actually understanding and connecting with people.
That was really beautifully said. I don't even know that we need to add anything to that. Thank you for that.
No, well, let's try. Yeah, that was really lovely. And so ideally, if the next person who shares, who we will pick randomly, you can also respond to that. But then also like offer, you know what I'm saying? Like it is difficult to make this a genuine. This is not like just a few people having a conversation, right? Like there's something here that makes this a bit more difficult, but we're going to try it. So consider what that person said and share yours too. I'm just going to go over here.
Hi, Dr. Nora. Hi, Son. I think one of the things that gets in the way of having these meaningful and very, very important conversations is like the biases that we harbor against each other. Just like, I think depending on a political party or depending on just like an identity, we automatically develop preconceived notions about the other that gets in the way of actually breaking barriers.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, yeah.
And by the way, we do have like, a line of these cards, so like we're going to move on.
Yeah,
to this. But we're just hopefully we'll just kind of hear like a nice, what am I trying to say? Cross section. Yeah, over this side.
In the hat, guy.
Hat?
Yeah.
Hello, Doctor and Mr. Badgley. Kind of contrary to what the previous person said, I think part of what gets in the way is not necessarily a lack of trying, but trying to figure out when you're no longer talking to someone who's willing to hear what you're saying, or someone who has an open mind and you're kind of talking to a brick wall, and when it's time to just walk away. And that might be part of how it hurts having these meaningful conversations when you're trying to talk to someone who, through talking with them and trying to have a meaningful conversation, you realize they have no interest in hearing the other side.
Mm. So feeling like any effort or attention that you give to a conversation almost falls flat.
Yeah, like even if you present somebody, especially in the past, 4 years that we've seen with the previous elections, even if someone sees, factual evidence of something, they still kind of have their own confirmation bias that they're right no matter what, even when you present them with facts. So it's kind of hard to stay there and try to have that conversation instead of just giving up and walking away.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Are you writing what people are saying? Also, I just want to clarify, Penn is taking notes on what you guys are saying. He's not just like...
No, I'm on Twitter.
Yeah.
This is a bunch of nonsense. No, of course not. I'm taking notes. I'm really glad that we went right into the social, drawing it back to the personal for a moment, the interpersonal, the sort of love relationships. What we're talking about when we say, we're seeing in others like, oh, well, they're not really trying. This idea that we're trying to communicate something that is falling on deaf ears. That actually is, of course, often it's true, but often it also may not be. Like, what we're dealing with is our perception at all times. It's not reality. It's not just truth. It's our perception of others. And so I feel you there, because like the trepidation that we fear entering into like a meaningful conversation of difficulty, particularly when it involves race in this country, I mean, the most challenging and vital issue, I would say, at least certainly it's at the top of the list, amongst all the others, is that we have all these ideas of identity. That not one of us is free from bias. Not one of us. We couldn't possibly be. Like, that's what's so cool about the fact that we're finally recognizing this at, like, I don't know, a larger cultural level, but we're not at all equipped yet, in large part, to have these conversations. Because the same thing when you're past the 2-year mark, when you're in marriage, and you have children, by the way, like, the kind of things that become difficult, you realize when you overcome them, you start to realize, like, wow, I thought I was seeing reality, and I wasn't. I thought this person was acting in a way that had to do with me, and I'm realizing this has to do with, by the way, in relationships, it's always their parents, it's always your parents, you're always dealing with some kind of cycle. You're being passed the baton by generations before you, your parents. And then culturally, socially, we're being given the greater baton by the generations before us. So, how do you think cycles end? They just peter out? No, they actually intensify unless you consciously do the work in your heart about how it feels to be I have to. We talk about bias as though we really understand it that well, and I don't know. I'm going to suggest that we might understand it intellectually, but when it really comes down to it in our hearts, we're not comfortable with acknowledging our biases, in large part. Some of us excel at it, maybe. Again, stand strong for the rest of us, and share.
I wanted to also speak to this idea of identity. I think it's really, see, I'm nervous to say this because I think it's not going to be popular, and that's probably why I should say it. So I think that it's very easy for us to make our beliefs our identity, or to make our experience our whole identity. And so the color of my skin is my identity. My sexuality is my identity. My gender is my identity. Which we wouldn't do if we didn't live in an oppressive society, but that's another conversation. But
I actually think that's this conversation, but continue. We're talking about oppressive, systems.
No,
Yes,
it's like conversation adjacent. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so we have a tendency to take these things that we've experienced and the beliefs that we have and these worldviews that we have, and we make it our entire identity. So that if you don't agree with this one aspect of me, you have now rejected my identity. Or the other side of that coin is, if this is my identity, if I am going to accept that you have a point in your opposing viewpoint, if I'm going to accept that I understand where you're coming from, even though I don't agree with you, what ends up happening is, and this is not my own thought. I want to say this came from a TED Talk by Cassie J that you guys should all watch. But she put it very succinctly. She said, when we humanize our enemy, we risk being dehumanized by our community. Think about that. When we humanize the enemy, we now risk being dehumanized by our community. This thing that we've made our own identity, when we accept that that the enemy is also human, we run the risk of our community seeing us as a sellout. And that's a big reason why we stay as opposed and as divided as we are, is because to accept any differently feels very vulnerable and unsafe in a way. Am I making sense?
Yeah, I also like that because, in particular what's happened in the last 3 years as the entire world was forced to be even more virtual than it already was, and sort of screen living more than we already were, is that the sort of natural and incredible human desire and ability to communicate constantly, which should be celebrated and encouraged and increased even, that was given expression on a handful of social media platforms that were designed with profit in mind during this small period of human history. It's not like our culture is just developing in a healthy environment, and the ways in which a lot of these conversations have been started and continue culturally is given a good chance to not just become volatile. Am I making sense? Let's be real, it's Twitter, and it's Facebook, And it's, what are the other ones? Instagram and
TikTok?
TikTok isn't really where people go to.
I know, I was just thinking about all your
communicate the
TikToks
same
and
way,
how
but,
good they are.
But yeah, I mean, just it's, you know, these are it's like a small handful of platforms. I mean, I'm not saying anything new here. I get that. Like, I see a lot of nodding heads, so I know that you guys are all already thinking this. But I'm just encouraging us to underscore it. Like, the way that we've been communicating, the manner of communication that has evolved on toxicity, on on social media, and through our phones. It's a very specific time and place that it's happened. It's not just like this is how humans always are going to be, and how we're always going to communicate with each other across the globe instantly. You know, no, it's like it's these small groups of, you know, what we now know are mostly white men, like, designing these platforms. And so, you know, so anyway, just, I don't want to beat that one over the head, but let's acknowledge how, particularly in the last couple years, our perception of how these conversations are already going is shaped a lot by the way we think of social media. Whereas, like, if you just talk to somebody, it might not go that way. Like, it's not like, I don't want us to just assume that we're saying, like, conversations are always hard. They're not if you have them. But I think what we're suggesting is that our capacity to have them is not being fostered. It's not being encouraged. And then what we do see, you know, on shows we shall not name, and many others like them, is relationships fraught with conflict and contention, where if you would just stop and say, oh, you know what, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. I'm sorry. End of story. End of the show. Roll credits. If you put your phone down and say you're sorry and take a breath, like, you don't have a storyline there, you know? So yeah, I just wanted to pause and just sort of acknowledge that. Like, we don't want it, like, this idea when people say, like, relationships are hard, or, you know, it's a lot of work. I mean, yeah, that's true, but, like, past a certain point, it shouldn't be that hard. It shouldn't be that much work. That's a sign of incompatibility, you know? And then at that point, you have to take stock and understand why you are putting yourself in relationships with people you're not compatible with.
Now
And
you're
that's the
getting
whole-
into my territory.
Yeah. You know, and by the way, we can go there for a moment, because I think what we constantly find is how exciting it is. You can link that directly to matters of social significance. It's like, it really is one for one. We're going to test that. But anyway, yeah. Should we go to
Yes.
the next card? We are still on the first card.
Yeah, wait, did I? Okay, yeah.
My goodness. How are we doing on time?
I don't know.
Oh, I have an iPad here. I'm still on New York time. What is this?
We're an hour behind.
Ah, yeah.
What time is it?
Yeah, no, it's 5:26? Oh, I thought I'm
Okay.
not on New York time here. Yeah, it's late. we have an hour, I guess, right?
No, I think we have
Half an hour. Cool. All right,
Yeah.
sorry, we won't bore you. Let's go on to the next one.
This is
We
it.
have it. Yeah, so when have you found yourself most receptive to hearing other perspectives? And then also, when have you found yourself walling off? Now, again, we're acknowledging it's not always easy to really know. But even some of what was being suggested earlier was like, we're talking about when others are less willing to listen, but like, let's really remember that sometimes that's our perception. So this is the flip side of that. When have we been able to really perceive that others are perceptive and receptive to hearing other perspectives?
So yeah. Sure, go ahead. 1 second.
Hi.
Ah.
First of all, thank you both for coming. Really appreciate it. I think that for me personally, I find myself most receptive to other people when they're able to find a gray area. I think that with social media and everything that we ingest on the internet, it is very much the algorithm that is curated to agree with everything that you want. And because of that, a lot of the conversations that we're having now tend to agree with what we already perceive in our opinions. And so you find yourself closing yourself off to someone when they have the exact opposite opinion to yours. And instead of hearing a gray area of where you can both connect with each other, you both go to an extreme. You're like, oh, you're this political party, so I'm not going to listen to you at all. Or, oh, you believe in this, so I have no respect for you whatsoever. But I think that where I find myself closing myself off that I think makes sense and is kind of justified is when they're attacking you as a person and not the opinions that you hold. So as soon as my own morals come into question because I support this, then I'm gonna be like, okay, like let's shut that down and we're having a totally different conversation now.
Are you able to articulate or like kind of identify when it becomes personal? Like what's the difference for you between personal and not?
I think it all comes back to identity and to what a lot of people were identifying before is as soon as you put yourself in the hyperbolic situation that you were just having a conversation about and you're like, I guess a way to explain it would be if you're, let's say you're talking about abortion rights, right? And as soon as you say that you're pro-life or pro-choice and somebody attacks you and says that you're a terrible person because you think X, Y, and Z and you're a baby killer and blah, 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 that's when you take a step back and you're like, okay, we're not gonna have a meaningful conversation if you continue to think that way. But if you're able to say, okay, I believe that, you know, X, Y, and Z because of my religious beliefs or because of the interpersonal beliefs that I have, then I think that that's when you're able to have a meaningful conversation with someone else.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think, thank you for that. And I mean, because of time, and I really do want to hear more perspectives, so I won't share based on that, but I'm gonna hopefully,
percolate?
Yeah, I think somebody else will probably share what I'm thinking, and so I want to hear it from somebody else.
Hello. So I think it really just all goes back to social media because, you know, it's like a space where like you're so like away, like you're so detached from like what's happening on the screen. Like you can even like no profile picture, no name. You're no associate. Like you can say like whatever you want, and like nothing is gonna happen to you. So I think like it really comes down to the fact that like this anonymousness that you can get from saying whatever you want on social media, and then like so you never really get any actual discourse going because it's just like you saying whatever you want, like screaming things on a screen, and then like if someone just screaming back, and then like that's the end of it. So like everything is really blown up out of proportion, but there's so many conversations going on that just gets lost into nothing. So it really boils down to like nothing meaningful ever happening.
So that's very true. Thank you for that. And we are, psychologically, we're a lot more likely to be nasty when we don't think we're going to come face to face with the other person. Just like if you, I don't know, it always goes back to road rage for me, but like, I mean, not for me, but like, you know, you scream at someone or give them some kind of nasty gesture, and then when they pull up next to you at the light, what happens for you? You know, you're like, don't look, like, you know what I'm saying? We don't like to be held accountable for the thing that we say or the thing that we do. That's why everybody goes on their Finsta and says the really nasty stuff. But you know it's true.
Is that really something that happens? You have a second account to be nasty online?
I don't.
I mean, you don't.
I for sure don't. No, I mean, people get second accounts to like lurk and yeah, be creepy. But to your comment, what do you think would be, and I know this isn't the question up here, but what do you think is the solution to that?
I think the solution just comes down to like having like people have like accountability for what they're like doing. So like, you know, you can make 1 million Twitter accounts and say a bunch of things to 1 million different people, but like it never like will come back to you because like, you know, if we're talking face to face and like you say something that is like truly awful to me, it's like you're accountable because I'm right here in front of you. So like if you disrespect me in some way, then it's like now you have that accountability and I know you. Where it's like online, you know, you don't have that. So I think like having a way to like limit the amount of like that's going on could like help increase the amount of actual like genuine discourse that we could have online. Because right now it's like having this isn't very, you know, like common, whereas like online speaking is like the #1 way to like converse with other people. And I think going forward it's going to like continue to be bigger and bigger. And that's going to be like the main place like it is now. So like having a place where people can talk and, you know, like, and show that that's who they are will like improve discourse going into the future.
Thank you for that. I think because we don't have a lot of time left, I actually do want to, I do want to sort of have an impromptu question it's based off of what we're doing here and in response to a lot of what's been shared. How does this cycle between two people end? Sometimes one person is wrong. Sometimes they've done something hurtful and they are wrong and they need to understand what it is to become accountable and responsible. Depending on what they've done wrong, it's either, reconcilable or it's not. Now let's not take this sort of really gross injustices that can occur between two people. Let's take something that's reconcilable and between two people who could really make it and love each other, right? So there's going to come a point in that relationship where one person has said something, done something that is unjust in some degree to the other. Now, it's been my experience, and please back this up with the real science aspect of it. The hardest thing about a relationship that again we don't see modeled out there, it's nobody's responsibility but your own. And by the way, this is where I really want to draw a porous line between what you were sharing and what I'm sharing, but that there is a relationship. And I don't know exactly how to connect them. Because it's not your responsibility to end the cycle, So, but then the question is whose is it? It's a shared responsibility, but you can't force anybody else to take responsibility. You can only take responsibility yourself. So while socially, in this case, it's certainly not we can't put the onus on marginalized people to sort of that's obviously what we're realizing is not the thing to do. However, what in an interpersonal relationship, a love relationship is you can't control what your other partner thinks or does or feels at all. You can't even control how you feel. This is the strange space of a relationship. You realize you can't even control how you feel. The only freedom you have as a person trying to create love, the only freedom you have is how you respond to how you feel. If you try to control your feelings, that's often akin to something like repression or suppression, and that can create a lot of toxicity. However, you can't just give free rein to your feelings. That's chaotic. What a person in a relationship that intends to sustain that one, especially once kids are involved, and it's important that you do that for many reasons, and they're one of them. The stakes couldn't be higher, in a sense. Your partner can do something wrong, and you realize I have to remain quiet right now. I have to listen. Now, it's much easier to talk about that in a way where we're all yeah, that resonates when it's between two people. I'm well aware how uncomfortable it is to suggest that it's exactly the same, socially, that's not all that's involved. But there's something there that tracks, that I'm trying to get at it, right? I hope that's understood and there's some kind of trust here. The fact remains, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, no matter what the context is, you can only control how you respond to your feelings. You cannot control what others do, let alone how they feel. You cannot even control how you feel. That is what, time and time again, remains one of the greatest mysteries of life to me. I'm wow, my feelings, I don't have control over them, and they constantly make me uncomfortable. Fuck my feelings, man. It's hard. It's hard.
Can I add to that though?
No, I'm on a roll, Nora. No, I'm just repeating myself now. But yeah, I hope that's taken in the right spirit.
I would say that I think you have control of one other thing. I think you have control of how you think about the other person.
I really like that, and I think that is a response.
Yeah.
That's you choosing how you frame the other person is a response to how you feel about them, because you might feel
Because again, so I feel like we need to talk about stuff a little bit. I'm just kidding.
No,
I'm teasing, but I think part of what we're getting at is like considering different ways of thinking about the person that we're talking to. You know, a lot of times when we're talking to somebody who says something ignorant or aggressive, the joking response these days is to be like, who hurt you? But actually, like, it's the most legitimate response is to wonder, like, who truly hurt them.
When they were an innocent child, essentially, you know, at some point, like,
Yeah,
they were innocent and
because-
younger to a degree.
Yeah, because every time, 9 times out of 10, when you're talking to somebody who's coming off in an aggressive way, that aggression is a mask for some kind of deeper pain. Even the most like racist of Nazis, the most, I did it, I brought the Nazis into the conversation.
They've entered the chat.
But the most hateful people in the world have somewhere in their life, typically in their childhood, not to get all like psychological about it, but they have somewhere in their life where they were deeply, deeply wounded. And what you're seeing from them is a manifestation of that wound. And so we can choose to take it personally. We can choose to be like, they hate me, they don't understand me, they're never gonna get it. Or we can be, and I know it's gonna sound corny, and I know a lot of you wanna roll your eyes, but I'm gonna say it anyway. Or we could choose to be compassionate and curious. It doesn't mean that we have to agree with them. It doesn't mean they have to be our best friend. But at the very least, and this will help you regulate your nervous system, at the very least, we can choose to wonder, to be curious about their why, about what it was that got them to this point of this specific interaction that you're having with them. Is that making sense?
And also, what I want to add to that, the nervous system aspect, is the reason this is difficult is because we also say me, but we're learning, it's hard to ask ourselves this question. Where was I this hurt that I turned to anger? Where, you know, and it doesn't have, I mean, some of us, quite many of us, have specific events that are clear. But we're all growing up in a very toxic culture that wounds us with a million little cuts, you know, every single one of us. It doesn't matter who you are. We know that. Like that's, and so this is again where like the social and the personal are really connected. You know, the one space where you cannot avoid, if you're going to be in a relationship past a certain point, you cannot avoid this kind of personal introspection. You can't avoid it in social relationships. You can avoid it on social media. You know, that's actually why we're all like hiding out there. Like, yes, I have no problems. What's up? You know, it's like it's clear. You know, it's very easy and straightforward in that way. But when you're in a relationship, there comes a point where you're like, wow, I'm not responding to you. I'm responding to an earlier relationship.
Reacting.
And eventually, yeah, I'm reacting to an earlier relationship, which at some point was one or both of our parents, whether they're present or not, especially if they're not present, by the way. Like, it's just there. It's just simply there, you know. And it's like, it's so tried and true with love relationships that like at some point, you know, everybody digs into this if they're gonna make it past a certain point, and then. But I think it's really interesting to think like, okay, so how does this transpose onto the more social interactions? You know, how much does me thinking about like literally how anger and, well, how first fear and sadness was, my nervous system became acculturated to this, so that my natural response to a demonstration of love actually is, you know, is mistrust. Yeah. Who hurt you? Yeah, go ahead.
I saw your hand, and then I want to get to the next question. So.
I
Yeah.
hate hearing my own voice.
Same.
Okay, thank
No,
you.
you don't.
Things are better. Okay, so what you were saying about the understanding and then thinking about who hurt them and that kind of part about it, I feel like sometimes, well, more than sometimes, we come to a point where we're so upset and we're taken over by emotions that we don't feel that way. Like, we don't want to think about who hurt them. We don't want to think about why are they feeling this way, why are they talking to me like this. Instead, we get so upset that we don't do that. And then maybe afterward we reflect on that. And like maybe the next day we're like, damn, like I should have thought about that, or I should have been nicer. But I feel like one thing that we can do, which is like maybe part 2 of what we can do, I feel like it's trying to figure out a way to make them empathize. So like trying to put what they did into perspective for them. So I don't know how to explain it better, but it's like, for example, like, I don't know, if somebody did something to you and you're like, okay, trying to explain to them, you're like, this is like if I did this to you, like how would you feel, you know? I feel like that's one of the only things we can do in this day and age. Do you know what I mean? Like it's one of the only parts of control that we have.
I think that that's a really great point. I would also add to that I think what inspires people to do that is if we model it ourselves. Do you know what I mean? Like if we're willing, and this is where it's uncomfortable, but if we're willing to be like modeling for them what we're asking them to see, then the defensiveness drops and they see like, no, you're trying to like meet me somewhere to like create deeper understanding. Does that make sense a little bit?
Yeah, that does make sense, yeah.
Okay.
Let's go to the next question because we're going to go to the next question. Whoever wants to keep your hands up, keep them up. We're just going to.
Okay.
Oh no.
Sorry. I just wanted to see how many questions we have.
Well, you actually kind of, we did this one earlier. You asked it rhetorically.
Yeah.
But maybe.
Well, we didn't talk about like what do you risk losing. I brought it up.
Oh, you didn't answer it?
No.
Okay, great.
Unless nobody wants to talk about it, then we can go on.
No. So let's just add this to the mix. So we're thinking now how, and actually what you just shared, you know, I mean, you said it in so many words. What I think you were kind of saying is like, it's hard to think about how they've been hurt when they're hurting you. I mean, and that's, in a lot of ways, that's fair. Yeah. So what? So they're allowed to be hurt and out of pocket, but I'm not. Right? Like that's unjust.
Gross. I feel like that happens, especially, and then that's where identity comes in. And then you're like, I've been put in this place so many times in my life. Like, for me, like, as a Latina, I'm small, I'm like, I got a high voice, nobody listens to me sometimes, you know? And then, obviously, people associate my identity with what their biases are. So they, like, immediately, they're gonna be like, oh, she's sassy, or like, she's got that Latina fire, all that stupid things, right? So automatically, I've been shut down so many times that it's like, why should I care? Or like, how am I gonna change this one person when I haven't changed so many? It's, I don't know, it comes down to like, why should I be the one who's doing it? Because I'm tired of trying to do it. You know what I mean?
So that is literally that question. And I'm not gonna try to answer it. I'm not gonna try to answer it. Yes.
I see with what you're saying because I truly have before I went to a performing arts high school, I went to a high school in the suburbs. It was mostly white kids. And I have been put in so many situations where things have been said, and people look to me to be like, well, now it's your job to educate them. And it's like, no, it's not. Like, I would kind of like to take my time to educate you, but we live in a day and age where we have cell phones, we have the entire internet at our fingertips, where it's like, it's not really, I just don't feel like it's my job to educate you, when, especially if you come from a place of privilege and so much of it, you need to be the one to educate yourself, especially when you are the voices that people are going to be listening to. They're not going to listen to me. They're not going to listen to you because of what you just said. You're Latina, you have a high voice, things like that. They're not going to listen to me, a gay black man. They're not going to listen to me because they won't take me seriously as they would a white straight man. And that's the truth, and it's hard to say, and it's hard to like put it out there, but like it's the facts, and I think it's just like really kind of the country that we live in, and it's messed up, but it's the truth.
No, yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Of course it is. In fact, yeah. Can I ask you a question? So then just say more about what you think the responsibility, where you think the onus lies, and where the responsibility lies. Because let's be real, what you're talking about, like we're talking about a largely white male population in the sense that when it comes to what, I mean, like I don't need to explain it to this room, but I guess if I'm going to try and like, do I need to frame that, or can I just say like we know what we're talking about here, right? Yeah. Okay, cool. So can you just say more about where? And it's a genuine question. I'm interested. Then keep going. Where's the responsibility, and where's this dynamic headed?
I think it really comes down to, like, if you want to be educated, then ask questions. You know, if you do something and you don't, and like I said, it's not my job to educate you, but if you are genuinely curious, I'm more than happy to have a conversation with you. I'm more than happy to lay it out A to Z with you if you show that curiosity to want to learn. But like, if you do something, I just really don't think it's really like my duty to like, well, now let me tell you why this is wrong in 2023.
Yeah, no, that's fair. So I'm just going to keep asking you, and then I actually want to go to your person next to you. So hold on. So just because this is actually kind of what we're like here for, right?
I love that we're getting into this 5 minutes with 5 minutes left.
It's fine. We can go a little bit over, just a little bit. I'm going to call it. Can we go over? Yeah. What are the conditions that you? There's no wrong or maybe even right answer. It's what you feel, right, and what you think. Like, what are the conditions that you would like to exist in order for that? So you talked about curiosity. Like, it's really beautiful how the first thing you said was like, I would like to, but. So let's acknowledge the reality that there's a history here. Between me and between you, there's a balance and a dynamic where I'm not coming from the same place that you're coming from. So like, we can't just all show up and be like, well, we're all at the table now. Like, we all know that. So what are those conditions where it's like, let's not get to the but. Let's believe that we can like have the I can, right? You would like to. You would love to, I think you even said. I mean, I don't want to put words in your mouth. but you know, like, so what is that? If. I would like to if. I can if.
I think when you show curiosity, it shows a want, you know, and like if you show curiosity, it shows that you want to learn why what you did was, you know, wrong, right? So, but if a lot of the times I find when things happen and they get called out as it's wrong, the immediate reaction is to put out a statement, well, but this, that, and the third, and you know, but this is where I come from, and it's like, and it's just like, yes, like, I don't know, like, did you want to expand on,
yeah.
You know, like, hi. So I think that for me, I think a lot of times, like I was actually kind of just talking about this yesterday, but especially like with this being our syllabus week and everything, we keep hearing like this same spiels of like classroom agreements and like cultural sensitivity and like knowing what to say in the classroom. And I think a lot of times the focus is on how we can respectfully respond when something has been said, put ourselves in someone else's shoes to try and see where they're coming from when a mistake has been made or something comes out wrong. But I was just kind of thinking about it yesterday, why can't we shift that perspective to be, if you recognize your privilege before you speak, I think a lot of times it would be harder for there to be a moment where it's like, oh, now I have to recognize your privilege for you because you didn't recognize it before you started talking. You know, so if we all, instead of having the afterthought of like, okay, let's all unpack this and all think about it and dive deep into why that was problematic, if we have the forethought of, well, before I answer this question or speak or say this thing, that, and I understand that that might be something that for a lot of white people, they've never been asked to do before. You've never really had to consider your identity in spaces because it's the default. It's like normal. So I've had like friends ask me all the time why I think about race all the time and why I'm always thinking about my identity and why Marley make everything about race. But I think for me, and I think this goes back to what you were talking about earlier about like making identity your character traits, your thing. And I think for me, it has been my thing because I haven't really had the time to think about what it means for me to be an artist or a creative person because I'm too busy spending all of my time thinking about what it means for me to be Black and be a woman. And when I find myself in rooms, like even from middle school, when we have our conversations about race and about slavery, everyone's looking to me to respond and talk about my experience. So I think it's kind of like, I don't know, it feels like a little bit oxymoronic to be like, okay, well, you make everything about race and everything is about race, but whenever race gets brought up, it's, what do you have to say about it? So I think that's why it's hard to know when I am like Black in a room and when I am just in a room.
Can I ask you if curiosity does the same thing for you that it does to the person standing next to you? You know, like something that you seem to share was that curiosity would mean a lot. Does it mean the same thing to you?
I see where he's coming from in some ways, and I feel like I am a very empathetic, people-pleasing person, so sometimes I will just like talk, and I'll let you know, and I'll talk about my experiences, and I'll let you know why what you said was wrong, but I think that has been abused sometimes for me. Like, in my life, I've had people just like, I've had white friends, instead of them being able to confront racism in their lives, they will get me to do it for them, and they'll get me to be like, oh, Marley, this person just said this thing and that's so bad, you should go talk to them. Instead of being like, I was like, well, you were there, what did you say? You know, I think that's what it is, and I completely agree with what he said about like, at first, like when I was growing up in middle school, because we're a weird group of people, we grew up like as technology developed, so when I was younger, I had no problem, like, I was actually like really dying to be able to talk to people about this because nobody wanted to know, and I felt like it was my duty and my right, but that gets really like tiring after a while of just reiterating the same things. And I think now that we've seen the shift in technology and like, yes, social media has all of its terrible things, but the advantages that it has made in being able to spread social justice throughout its platform so that Black people in predominantly white areas don't have to keep reiterating the same thing to everyone around them has gone very far. So like, we do live in an age where everything that you're asking me is a Google search away, and sometimes it's curiosity and sometimes it's laziness. And I think I just use my better judgment in those situations. And I feel like I've gotten a pretty good like scale at when I can tell when someone's being genuine by asking me a question or when they are using me to escape them doing the work.
No, because I could talk about this for like several hours, and I'm trying to just like hold back because everything you're saying, both of you, everything you're saying is so powerful and important. Do you feel, and this is directed to everybody in the room, really, I mean, the two of you and everybody, can you think of times and have you had experiences that felt meaningful and exchanges that felt powerful?
Certainly.
Okay.
And I'm not going to be quick because I know other people have, like, I'm going to be quick because, like, just...
I mean, the head nod is good enough. Like, not to cut you off. I'm saying we don't have, go on, sorry.
But there, I think one of the most meaningful conversations that I had with someone who disagreed with me was in like my freshman year of high school, and it was a girl who I'd been friends with for a very long time, and I grew up in a very like predominantly white, predominantly conservative community, and we never really talked about those things because, you know, when you're in, like, known somebody since kindergarten, you're not really gonna talk about, like, politics with them. You just, like, you've bonded as friends over, like, kindergarten stuff, so as you grow up, you don't really talk about that stuff. And this was around the time of, like, the election, so conversations started rising, we were older, and I think because she was my friend first, like, she was my friend before I knew we saw differently, it was a lot easier for me to talk to her, and I think it was a lot easier for her to empathize with me because we knew each other as people outside of like, outside of everything that had been going on and things that we had heard growing up from our parents and things like that. And I think it was also because of that gray area that was getting talked about earlier. It's just a lot easier to like talk to someone like that at that time. And yeah, I think a lot of those meaningful, really nice conversations happen once you have a fundamental understanding of each other as people and you know like where they're coming from. You can really sense them.
So that point that you just touched on, I mean, it's significant that it was friendship. It was friendship that allowed you to know, it sounds like what you're saying is that your friendship allowed you to know that there was something in there you could trust and that this was a human. There was safety there, right? And I think, and please amend this as you see fit, and maybe anyone else here amend it, it feels to me like what we're circling and what we're trying to get at is like, because I believe it's possible, but it's like, I'll go ahead and just say it. How do we cultivate some kind of baseline of like a bare minimum of trust and safety so that we can have more interactions like this with people we don't know as well? Because surely your friend, love her to bits, you know, she's probably, like, we're all in some ways average, right? Like, people are exceptional and then people are average. In some ways, we're all average, and in some ways, we're all exceptional. Like, your friend was surely not, we can't assume she was your soulmate of a friend who the only person you were going to have that conversation with at that time. It's just because you knew each other, right? It was just because you knew each other and therefore you had that trust. So I guess what I'm suggesting is that, like, what we're talking about is a capacity for love that is not complacent, believing that it visits us. It's a cultivation and it's a discipline and it's actually a radical act. You know, I mean, the wrong version of this is the most annoying platitude and actually a dangerous platitude. You know, like, love is the answer. Well, it is, but like, what the F do you mean and what are you doing about it? Like, you know, I guess what I'm curious is like, we believe the reason this question is here is because considering your answer to this will help us each all understand how we can cultivate an environment more and more and more where we can have interactions like this with a wider scope of people. It feels to me like that is our responsibility no matter who we are, you know, and for some of us that can feel more taxing and exhausting, and then, you know, the responsibility is on the people surrounding us to support us, right? Like, that's, so nobody can do this alone. There's that reciprocal aspect of culture and society which we need, and we're so accustomed to a society not really supporting us. So I feel you if anybody's really feeling like, nah, I don't like this, you know. But yes, I've now gone on for a while.
I just want to add really quickly. There's a lot of conversation about how our emotional process, our emotionality, is kind of dependent on how the other person interacts with us. And again, this is another thing that goes back to the very basic ingredients of like love relationships and your closest interpersonal relationships. If your sense of peace is dictated by the people around you constantly, you're always going to be feeling nauseous. You're always going to be feeling unsettled. At the same time, I recognize we are connected and we influence each other and we impact one another. But if our sense of well-being depends on the people around us being emotionally regulated and emotionally mature, we're going to be living in a constant state of dysregulation and discomfort. So part of this work involves finding our own internal stability and strength to know that even if we encounter a person who's like profoundly ignorant and profoundly hurtful, that is about them and not about me. Does that make sense? I realize it's a million times easier said than done, but about getting to a place where other people's ignorance doesn't rock our sense of worth and our sense of peace in the way that it so easily does.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's really well said. Like the anthem of like, if I do this wrong, it could go really poorly. This does then get down to a sense of identity that is so fundamental and so like satisfactory. I don't mean satisfying, like you can experience personal pleasure from your sense of self, but like that you are satisfied, that you are content with who you are. What level of identity actually gives us that, you know? From a spiritual perspective, like to me, from Kendrick's song All Right, like the term, hear me out. The
He's
term,
obsessed.
God's got us. I'm just gonna say that phrase. To me, what that's speaking to, I'll use more secular language for a moment, just as an exercise. Like, it's suggesting that despite the emotional dysregulation of those around me, there is a sense of identity that I have, and a sense of love that I have capacity to like accept in myself for who I am, that actually the most important thing is all right. The most important thing is whole in me. And there are times in my life, no matter who I am, no matter how I identify, no matter what life I've lived, where that is all I'm going to have. And that's true that's the human experience. I don't think should be a controversial suggestion. We all suffer, and at some point we all feel alone, and at some point we probably are, you know. So, you know, this sense, it's so challenging, but it becomes the most important stuff of life that, again, like I would call spiritual, or you could call it psychological or moral. There aren't a lot of other things you could call it, you know. Like, what is that sense of self that I have that allows me some kind of peace and tranquility, you know? It's a profound one. And we're not here to give that answer to you, right, obviously, but like, at least a suggestion that is what we're searching for, and it's a worthwhile pursuit. You know, it seems like maybe more and more people are losing the idea that that's a worthwhile pursuit. I don't know, but yeah, we still have some hands raised. We have gone over now. What are we looking at? Should we wrap up? We have to wrap up, don't we? Yeah. Do we go to the last card?
No, she's like ready to take the stage.
Yeah. So okay.
Well, we can go to the quote.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is like, you know, when in doubt, go with a Baldwin quote. Hopefully it's not lazy. No, I mean, I've always loved this. It speaks to what we're speaking to, and in a lot of ways, of course, much better and poetic and stronger, but, you know, this is the spirit, like, I don't know what else to say, and this is where it has to be an ongoing conversation. I hope this has been in some capacity inspiring. I'm so sorry for those of you we weren't able to call on. Obviously, you can only get so far in an hour and a half with a celebrity on stage, and I don't know. I'm just
And pen.
no. The applause is truly for you, honestly. Like this, like we're trying to figure out more and more how to do this for you and have it be.
Thank you
engaging.
guys.
Yeah, thank you.
You were a beautiful audience. Thank you so much.